So today we're going to be looking at our Blizzard Ice Spike Sorcerer. I happened to get the blue rose, the new unique ring for Ice Spikes to drop just from like a normal Nightmare dungeon. So I wanted to make a Blizzard build and I was not disappointed at all. I am running basically tier 100s. I actually haven't had a tier 100 sigil to drop, but I've been doing like 98s with pretty much no problem whatsoever as long as I'm paying attention and not dying to stupid modifiers. Otherwise, for Uber bosses, Duriel, or anything like that, you guys are going to melt. I can melt Uber Lilith, her first phase, very, very quickly. And I am so far from perfect gear. It is not even funny. I'm missing so much damage at the moment. So these melts are going to get even quicker, and running through these dungeons is just going to get even easier. But let's go ahead and jump into this build. But before we do, I just want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Dungeon Hunter 6, the newest game in the Dungeon Hunter franchise since 2015. And let me tell you, the anticipation was worthwhile. Dungeon Hunter 6 is a free-to-play mobile ARPG with a unique hero collector feature in a stunning fantasy style. And the best part is, it's absolutely free to play, so go ahead and download it with the link in the description or scan my QR code on the screen here if you're viewing on a PC. A really unique feature that I've not seen in this genre before is that in Dungeon Hunter 6, when you kill a boss, that is not the end. After that, you conquer them and you can summon up to 3 of them onto the battlefield with you to become members of your squad, and they can follow you anywhere and perform combo skills. And best part, there's over 100 uniquely designed bosses for you to conquer and explore, with more and more added monthly. Not to mention, you can also play with guildmates and battle in real-time guild wars. You gotta go down to my link in the description or scan the QR code to download it for free on both Android and iOS. Doing so will get you a special starter pack worth $50 if you use my link. This includes 10 summoning scrolls, 1 SSR Lieutenant, the Demonic Wolf, and 1 accessory pack. Also use your game account to enter the Lucky Spin event to win free great prizes like an iPhone, PS5, Apple Watch, and more starting on October 15th. But once again, thank you to Dungeon Hunter 6 for sponsoring today's video. Let's always start off with our skills first. So our skills are going to be Flame Shield, Teleport, Frost Nova, Deep Freeze, Ice Armor, and then obviously Blizzard. Nothing really too special there. Stuff that's been used for a while here on Sorcerer, but it still works very, very well this season. And our enchantments are going to be Firebolt and then also the Ice Shards enchantment. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at the skill tree now. So obviously, since Firebolt is going to be one of our enchantments, we're going to be starting off with that and just throwing 2 points into there. So we can go ahead and move down. From here, you guys can either put your points into Devastation so you get more mana so you can cast more Blizzards, or more points into Ice Shards if you want those to be killing enemies a little bit quicker. But the main point of these is just to proc extra blue roses for us. So depending on your mana situation, you can move these points around, but in general, you're just going to end up with 5 points here in our core skills. And then as we move down, we're just going to be speccing into Flame Shield and Mystical Flame Shield, and then Teleports, Shimmering Teleport, Glass Cannon. I have 2 points into Elemental Attunement right now. You can move these around, it's kind of up to you, but we are doing a lot of Lucky Hit. So this is going to be proccing very often for us, basically in those 10-second intervals. And then obviously Ice Armor, we're only going to be grabbing Enhanced Ice Armor, and then Frost Nova and Mystical Frost Nova. As we move down to our Conjuration section, we're going to be grabbing Precision Magic for that Lucky Hit chance. The more Lucky Hit we have, the more we can spam Blizzards and the more Blue Rose procs we can get going for us. So Lucky Hit is very important for this build. Otherwise, Align the Elements, Mana Shield, and Protection, we're going to be maxing out. Then once we actually get to Blizzard, you only need 1 point in here. I happen to have 7 because of my gear, unfortunately, right now. Do not worry about boosting the number of points you have in this skill. Ideally, this would just be 1 out of 5, but then otherwise we're going to be grabbing a Mage's Blizzard up here, and then we're going to be grabbing Devouring Blaze, just throw 1 point into Inner Flames to get over there. And then once we get to our ultimates here, obviously Deep Freeze, we're going to be maxing that out. And then on to the other passives in here, Permafrost, Hoarfrost, Icy Touch, and Frigid Breeze. Frigid Breeze is really nice since, once again, we're stacking our Lucky Hit really high. This way we can spam even more Blizzards and you guys can maintain that boss damage. And then Avalanche as our key passive. It's not really going to help out our damage because Blizzard doesn't really do damage. The main thing is just going to allow us to cast more and more Blizzards Shatter you can use, but it's really kind of redundant with this build. So if you're dungeoning, you can throw on Shatter if you want, but I like to just have the sustain of spamming more and more blizzards with the free casts. Now, for the amulets, like as you can see here, I have another +3 into Hoarfrost. This is a good option, but ideally I would like to have a +3 into either Permafrost or Icy Touch. It's completely up to you. Icy Touch is going to be active against everything, essentially, because everything's going to be vulnerable. And then the Permafrost is going to be a little bit better for bosses. So it's up to you. Either will work on your amulet, but I just wanted to point that out now while we're looking at these skills. But now let's go ahead and move on over to the gear itself. Like I was saying at the start, a lot of my gear is very far from perfect, so just keep that in mind. And obviously things will change here and there depending on your rolls for like resistances and stuff as you see that as we go along. But let's go ahead and start off with our helmet. So I am using the Godslayer crown right now. It's a big damage boost. Also, it's really helpful for grouping up enemies when you really need it. It is a 12-second cooldown, but that's usually from elite to elite. You're usually good to go. Also, it has really good stats. It has cooldown. It has max life, crowd control duration, and damage. So you're sacrificing a little bit of survivability. If you guys don't really care about the damage and you are finding yourself dying a little bit more, you can just trade this out with a normal legendary with like the damage reduction while you're in your blizzard. That's another really good one that you can throw up here and just stack it with max life, cooldown, and other like DRs, anything like that. But then moving on over to our chest piece, this is where I have the additional charge of Frost Nova. And then our affixes on here, we're going to be running cold damage. That is a big one. You're going to want to be stacking cold damage where you can on your chest piece and your ring. Otherwise, max life and then just general DRs. Damage reduction from burning is very helpful because everything's going to be burning. Every time we hit it, they're just going to immediately start burning because of our Firebolt enchantment. For our glove, this is where I have the Deep Freeze is going to generate the exploding ice spikes. This is actually going to be really helpful for our damage. As you guys are stacking up your blizzards, you're basically going to be putting out as many blizzards as you possibly can and maintaining your mana using all your different cooldowns. But there will be a point where you end up running out of mana after a very sustained boss fight. And then that's where you can pop your Deep Freeze and just absolutely chunk them. And then it will also reset some of your cooldowns after that. So you can just keep going. There's pretty much no downtime once you end up doing this. Also, it's going to make our ice spikes much more likely to hit our targets. So that's why this is a very good aspect to have on. Otherwise, on my gloves, I have attack speed, crit chance, lucky hit chance, and chance to restore resource. So a lot of these are pretty mid rolls. So this can get a lot better. Onto my pants, this is where another area I can improve on. I have, like I said, +4 into Blizzard right here. The other one was just where I think it was like a dodge chance. So I ended up just living with these for the time being. But otherwise, max life and then DRs, armors, that type of stuff. And this is where I have my disobedience. And then for the boots, I have teleport and Frost Nova because those will give us cooldowns. Also movement speed for just moving around. And then ideally, I would like to have a shadow resistance here. As you guys can see, my resistances, I'm basically capped on everything except for shadow. And I just have an overabundance of cold because of our Paragon board. So if I could swap that cold resistance out for shadow, I would definitely do it. But then on the boots, I have Ghost Walkers. So whenever you use Unstoppable, you gain that movement speed and can move freely through enemies. This is so nice for Blizzard because basically what you're going to be doing is casting it in front of you and just walking along, and enemies will be freezing and dying behind you, and you can just fly through the dungeon. So I really do like Ghost Walkers, but you can also use the Flame Shield, Immobilize, and pass through enemies, but this is active a little bit more often. And then onto the amulet. This is where I have mana cost reduction. Ranks of defense is really nice for our cooldowns, and then mastery you don't need. I would like to have cooldown in that slot, and then instead of Hoarfrost, I would like to have Icy Touch or Permafrost, those two passives I was talking about earlier. And then here is where I put the Blizzard Ice Spikes. Try to get this on the highest gear score item you can. So this actually came from a 925 piece of gear, so that's why its damage is so high. And then obviously on the amulet to boost it by another 50%. Now on our non-unique ring, crit chance is very, very important. The more crits you can get, the better, especially now with all the changes to crit and vuln. Just overall crit chance is very strong. This is where you're also going to want more cold damage. And then max mana is very helpful, so you can spam more blizzards. Otherwise, you can do max life or any sort of other damage option here. will be very good, like, or resource gen. That's another good affix to have instead of max life, because currently I have over 16,000, and this is like a crit chance elixir that is still active. So there's nothing else boosting my max health. And yeah, so we don't really need quite that much, but you can if you just want to be extra tanky. This is where I have the prodigy aspect. So using a cooldown is going to restore mana. This is our main way of maintaining our resource. You're going to be balancing all of your different cooldowns. So this is a pretty in-depth build when you're actually playing it. There's a little bit to keep in mind as you're playing. It's not just hold one button. So just keep that in mind as you guys are spamming your blizzards on bosses. And then the blue rose, like I said, this thing's really good. And the one that I have is terrible. It's the only one I've found so far. We could get this being a lot better. It is missing 50 item power, and it is a pretty low roll on there. Also, our mana cost reduction is pretty low. Our ice spike damage is pretty low. So there's a lot that we can get better on a new blue rose. But overall, I found this thing to be really good. I've messed around not using it, and I've actually been doing more damage to like Uber Lilith with it. So I've been really liking this, and it's really good in dungeons where you can actually freeze things, because that's going to end up being a 90% lucky hit chance to form that ice spike. And as you're grouping up all the enemies, it's just so good because it's just damaging an enemy. I've really liked the blue rose so far. And then for our weapons, let's start off with the wand. Here I have damage while you have a barrier with an emerald on it. And then I have all stats, crit damage, vulnerable damage, damage to burning. Ideally, I would like to maybe swap off crit damage for like int or something, but it's really not a big deal. Anything that's just active a lot. And then on my focus, I currently have the Storm Swell, where you deal increased damage of vulnerable while you have a barrier. This is all enemies are going to be vulnerable all the time. You're almost always going to have a barrier because you're spamming your cooldowns. So this is once again a constant 30%. And here I have crit chance. Once again, crit chance is very important. Crit chance against injured isn't too bad. It's not my favorite. Lucky hit chance is good, and chance to restore primary resource. You can mess around with different things, like you can get cooldown on here. Just anything that fits. Definitely focus on a higher item power. Mine is currently pretty low at an 850. I have not found a good focus yet. I have another emerald here. And then for the other gems that I forgot to mention on the armor, just do the rubies for more max life. And then on your jewelry, just fit in whatever resistances that you're missing. I personally find poison and lightning to be two big ones. Also, fire would be right up there too with those enemies. Shadow I don't find quite as important, but there are a couple enemies and bosses that will do shadow. But ideally, in endgame, you're going to get all of these up to max anyways. So just fill in wherever it needs. Taking a look at this season's most important aspect, our vampiric powers. Let's go ahead and go through our 5. There is one that you're going to be kind of swapping out depending on if you're doing uber bosses or not in kind of scenario. But the other 4 you're basically going to keep. There's another one you can swap out, but it's not really a huge deal. Overall, we're going to be using domination so we can deal that increased damage to enemies that are stunned and all that good stuff. This is one that you can actually swap out for some bosses. Depends on how fast you're going to end up knocking them down. If you are swapping anything out for bosses, the attack speed is pretty good. Otherwise, there are things like casting skill heals you if you want to just sit underneath the boss. But there are a couple options. For the most part, I keep this on with domination. And then hemomancy is really good for just keeping yourself alive in dungeons. If you want to swap this one out, you can do the undying again, swap it into there. I do have Sanguine Brace on for dungeons. This is really nice for staying alive and giving us more crit chance. Crit chance, like I've been saying throughout the video, is incredibly important, but for bosses, I will swap this out for the attack speed bonus so we can get more blizzards down quicker and deal a lot more damage. And then for our other one, we're going to be using a Curse Touch. This one I keep on all the time so we can inflict Vampiric Curse and it can spread. And this is where it's going to combine with Prey on the Weak, where we deal increased damage to vulnerable, and if enemies are affected by Vampiric Curse, they are vulnerable. So those two combined is what's going to be keeping enemies vulnerable at all times. But for any of my Uber bosses, the only one that I've really managed to bother swapping out is Sanguine Brace for the Ravenous attack speed. The other 4 I do just end up keeping, but feel free to swap them in and out as you see fit. Also, it's going to kind of depend on your gear. With my current setup on my packs, it ends up being with 6, 7, and 4, and I can swap these out freely and they all stay active. So that's currently what I'm doing with my armor pack setup. Now for everybody's favorite, the Paragon board, I've messed around with a couple different things. I'm not 100% sure this is what I want to stick with forever, but it's definitely been working for the time being. I might tweak some things here and there, but if I do update anything, it'll always be on the website with the build doc. So make sure you guys check that out and stay up to date as time goes on. But in the starting board is where I have the Stalagmite to actually increase our Ice Spike skill damage and give them that 10% crit chance. This is very strong, and I really do like to stack into this. Otherwise, just moving through non-physical damage is going to be a big thing in this Paragon board. As you see, that is going to be a big source of our damage. Otherwise, I kind of dip down in here into some resistance and max life. And then we move into the Enchant Master board. And this way we can get more non-physical damage over here in these areas. And this is where I have the Elementalist glyph to boost those non-physical damages and the resistances a little bit more. And then we kind of move up here to the middle for more non-physical damage in both sides and also a little bit of damage to elites. So overall, very good board. And then this is where I move into the Frigid Fate board. This way we can deal a multiplicative cold damage. And that's why we want to stack up our cold damage, because we can get this to the 30% very easily. So those additive colds end up being a multiplicative bonus, which is very helpful. And here is where I have the Enchanter for more non-physical damage as we stack the int. Otherwise, I'm grabbing some cold resistance and moving through the vulnerable damage, obviously, to get over here to the legendary node. And then the third board that I placed was the Elemental Summoner here, so I could get more max mana and actually get the bonus on it. As you can see, I'm just barely over that willpower threshold, but that's going to give us 8 more mana, which is helpful. So I do just dip into there for my third board. And then as my fourth board, I end up placing the Icefall. Now we're not actually grabbing Icefall because this is frost skills and we're using ice spikes, so it's not really going to help out our blizzards that much. So there's really no point. Otherwise, I am going to be grabbing the glyph node up here. So I currently have winter. Now for boss fights, if you guys are fighting uber bosses, this is where you're going to want to swap over destruction, because you can't technically chill a boss. So this isn't going to stack up unless they have ads around them, or if like there's a couple bosses that place like the bone walls, you can stack on those. But for the most part, for bosses, you're going to want destruction. If you're just doing a dungeon, you're perfectly fine keeping this, but if you're moving over to the uber bosses, definitely swap out over for destruction. Otherwise, I'm grabbing through Polar Rhyme. I kind of do like a little snaking up here and just grabbing the rare and magic nodes. And then as we move up, I am going to be grabbing the cold damage and the chill applications over here. This is going to help us out a lot with our freezing of enemies, because you can actually get it to move up to 4 ticks, I believe, instead of 5 ticks, if I'm correct on that. Otherwise, moving on over for our last board is going to be Static Surge. And once again, we're going to be grabbing more mana up here. So we're just going to snake up and then grab a last glyph over here. And this one is going to be a Dex Focus glyph, and this is going to be Flame Feeder, so we can deal that increased direct damage to burning enemies, which is very helpful. But overall, that's my current Paragon board. If I do end up changing things, it's probably going to be these 2 boards. I'll mess around with it and experiment with a few different things. But for the time being, I've had no issues doing like tier 100s and uber bosses. So I definitely think this is a very solid option to get you guys started. I did just want to show you guys my combo that I use for this build, because like I said, this is kind of an in-depth build. You're not just holding one button. So normally what I do, just pretend like this is an enemy up here, this little board. So I'll start off by placing a few blizzards, and then once my mana goes down a little bit, I will use a flame shield, because that is going to restore some of our mana and make our blizzards that we cast while it's active consume less mana because of the enhanced version of it that we have. And then from there, as my mana is moving down again, I will cast the ice armor, which will give us increased mana regen, so we can sustain even longer there. And from there, I will be throwing in teleports and frost novas as our mana is moving down. I just want to make sure I don't waste anything, so I do let it move down to like 2/3, a half before I do use those cooldowns. And then once we are finally out of cooldowns and we are moving down, what we're going to do is pop our deep freeze and sit in there and melt the boss. And then when we come out, it is going to reset a bunch of our cooldowns so we can spam even more. So that's where I was saying your mana is going to be going down, but if you are managing it correctly, you can maintain very, very good sustain across an entire boss fight. Yeah, that's our Blizzard Ice Spike build here for Season 2 and everything it has to offer. I think this is an incredibly powerful build. I know Ball Lightning is like all the rage right now, which we're going to be getting to next. So I'm very excited because I have not been playing Ball Lightning since Season 0. And that was my favorite build in the game so far, so I'm excited to see how it's playing out now in its incredibly strong state. But I think Ice Spike Sorc is right there with it, just below it. So this is definitely a very powerful build, and in some cases it will exceed it just because you can do it at range, so it could be a little bit safer for a lot of dungeon clearing. So this is a really good option if you're looking for a good sorcerer build to carry you through all the content in the game currently. If you did enjoy the build video and want to see more, make sure you are subscribed to the channel for more Diablo builds here coming shortly. Like I said, we're going to be working on some Ball Lightning. Then we might move on to some other characters like Necro and stuff. We're going to see what I'm feeling. But anyways, thank you all for watching this far in the video. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.